Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the second in a series of Massachusetts Civics for All webinars on remote learning. Today's discussion centers on civics in action, how to make it all come alive during remote learning. I'm Julie Silverbrook, Senior Director of Growth Initiatives at iCivics. I'll be facilitating today's webinar. We are joined this morning by Patrick McGravey, an 8th grade teacher from North Andover Middle School, and our moderator, David Buchanan, iCivics Director of Massachusetts Programs, to discuss how to engage all students in learning civics in these challenging times of remote learning. Participants will gain an understanding of a number of resources that incorporate technology into the classroom in a manner that is practical, meaningful, and fun for students. The session will include examples from platforms such as Google Classroom, Zoom, and Google Meets to show how you can record civic podcasts, videos, recorded lessons, and talk shows to make learning as accessible and meaningful as possible. Before I turn things over to David to kick us off, one logistical note. If you have questions for Patrick during his presentation, please input them into the question section of the webinar, and I will read those questions to Patrick during the Q&A portion of his presentation. Thank you, and over to you, David.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us this morning. It's great to have you with us. I'm Dave Buchanan. I'm the Director of Massachusetts Programs for iCivics, but I'm on this really as the representative for the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition that is hosting this webinar. The coalition was organized roughly 3 years ago and played a major role in the passage of the civics law that many of you are quite familiar with at this point. The coalition really tried to provide some extra structure to make sure that that law was passed properly. And also since then, we've been very active in continuing to advocate for improvements for civic education, collaborating with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and many others, including many legislators. And we've been fortunate over the last year or so to be helpful in terms of securing funding to make sure that the implementation of the new law really has some weight to it and is able to proceed successfully. So the coalition has its own website, and we'll provide the link for that and so forth, but we've done a lot of work in the last few months, particularly to update our site, particularly in response to the COVID-19 crisis. And one of the major new pieces to the website is what you see on screen here, this new set of resources for educators, students, and families that we purposely designed to address the challenges of the current moment for educators and for families. So you'll find a host of information about health issues here. Under the COVID-19 tab there, you'll find information for students and families to provide lessons and games and other activities that will engage students in civics during this time, and also a full set of resources for educators, which is all broken down by grade span to make it as useful and as effective, we hope, for all of you as educators. So that is our site, and we do hope you'll make use of that. We'll continue to update that, and we'll certainly be continuing to host these webinars. In addition to today's, we had one 2 weeks ago or so, and we have another one planned for early in June, which I'll talk about later on in the session today. So thanks again for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Pat and just mention that Pat is, as Julie said, is a 8th grade civics teacher in North Andover. He's very engaged in the new curriculum, the rollout of the new curriculum by the Democratic Knowledge Project, called Civic Engagement in Our Democracy. And Pat really has been a leader in many ways in the work of a whole coalition or consortium of districts that are working on that curriculum. And I would say is really an early adopter of many new practices around civic education as it pertains particularly to the 8th grade civics course. So we're fortunate to have Pat with us today, and I'm going to turn it over here to you, Pat.
Great, Dave and Julie, thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity to talk about civics in action and how to make it all come alive during remote learning. So this is kind of an agenda that most of you would probably have on your smart boards or classroom boards to talk about what we're going to be going through. So the what, I'm going to take about 10 minutes to tell you a little bit about the what are Civics in Action talks, the why even do these live or do them virtually, what's the point? And then I think the most important part of the talk today is going to be the how. What is the blueprint for success? I'm literally going to be giving you a play-by-play on how to do this in your own classroom remotely. At the beginning of this, I think a lot of you are probably going to say, why is he talking so much about live learning? I thought this was about remote learning. I promise you there is going to be a shift. I just kind of want to set it all up. I had to transform what I was doing live to virtually or remotely. So those are the three things that we're going to do today. And why I think the blueprint is the most important is in any PD that we do or we attend, you always want to walk away with something. And I can remember that a colleague many years ago said to me, you know, when you have PD, it's important you use it. You don't want to take the PD and just put it in your desk drawer. And so hopefully you will all use this and you will apply this. Great. So let's talk about a timeline. This is just a little timeline. I just want to give you a little perspective into my journey. Dave did talk about my involvement and what I'm doing now. A lot of this timeline, I think a lot of you are going to know, especially at the beginning, but I'm just going to take us all through it to give us a little perspective. So in 2018, and I think Dave referenced it, the Civics bill was signed into law by Governor Baker, and there was a new Massachusetts History and Social Studies framework course, and 8th grade students and teachers would be doing a 1-year intensive civics course. So obviously when that went down, I was very excited because I had always done civics, but in the US History 1 curriculum, it really mainly came towards the end. In the fall of 2018, my principal asked me to join the Massachusetts Cross-District History Mapping Committee, which maybe some of you have been on. They had one previously for the science frameworks to roll them out. And basically what we would do is we would look at the standards and break them down and plan. That was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed working with colleagues. I was lucky enough to meet two people from Harvard University's program called the Democratic Knowledge Project, the DKP, which some of you know about. And they were telling me a lot about the curriculum that they were piloting mainly in the Cambridge public schools. But in 2019, they were looking to go across the state. To make a long story short, I went to a spring session, and by the fall, I was all signed up and all ready to go. And I was a pilot teacher for their program, their 1-year program of civics, which kind of brought me to the next slide, which is the 2019-2020 school year. Previously, I had always done a yearly civics day. We had about 5 of them, and usually the last couple of weeks of school on one day, we'd have 3 to 6 sessions, and politicians would come in, and it was good, but they were making political speeches, and it was kind of like that nice to know stuff. The kids weren't really walking away with knowledge. So when I started piloting the civics curriculum with the DKP, I said, you know what, I'm going to have these more often, and I'm not going to have 120 kids in an auditorium. We're going to make it more intimate, and we're going to have about 25 to 30 kids, and we will run the sessions live. So that's exactly what we did. So starting from the fall all the way until Friday the 13th when we left because of the COVID crisis, I had 9 Civics in Action talks, which we will talk more about later. In March, obviously, those live sessions could no longer happen, so we had to go virtual. And that's where we're going to talk about virtual learning and remote learning. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey. Okay, the what. So this is a slide from a Civics in Action talk, and I like to show this slide because, as you can see, those kids do not look engaged, all right? And the one thing about this is you got to be reflective and you got to grow. My first Civics in Action talk did not go as well as I had anticipated. Feedback from the kids, they wanted more engagement, they wanted more involvement, and I was definitely able to make changes based on the feedback of the kids. And I'll show you the next slide. Look how happy everyone is there. Okay, that's probably about a month and a half later. So what Civics in Action talks are is I bring in civic actors, teachers, politicians, activists. I bring them to my school, the North Andover Middle School in North Andover, Massachusetts. We're a very large middle school. I have about 120 students. There are three teams of 120. So basically what I do is I bring in civic actors to teach students civic concepts that are relatable, engaging, and the real world. So some of the examples that we have in the town manager, who in our town is like our mayor. We had in the moderator of town meeting. We had in the director of youth services. We had 4 state representatives in. You can see Representative Jim Kelcourse out of Newburyport and Representative Christina Minicucci out of North Andover. We brought in 2 state senators, Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr, and we also brought in Congressman Andy Vargas, who is the author of the Civics bill, which was kind of great. Judges, activists, and then Harvard law students also came in to do a debate on New Jersey versus TLO live, and then we're going to be doing other ones with them in remote learning. So that kind of tells you a little bit about what these things are. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a very short amount of time, and I'm going to show you a live Civics in Action talk, and then I will show you a virtual one. You will have access to every single Civics in Action talk as a resource at the end of this. I've also partnered with the North Andover CAM cable company. They come in and professionally film them, and they edit them, and they upload them, and they gave me a YouTube channel, and it's been such a great resource. One of the important parts of the Democratic Knowledge Project curriculum is finding allies in civics. And I definitely found some great allies, both with the politicians, the activists, and of course the cable company. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is State Representative Trom Nguyen. She is in her 2nd year as a state representative, representing parts of Andover, Lawrence, and North Andover. Trom is very young and very dynamic, and she has a really cool story that she told the kids about getting elected. So I'm just going to show you a very short clip of this. Sorry, it's just taking a minute to buffer.
Back to Vietnam together to attend my cousin's wedding. That was the first time that my parents had ever been back since we've been here in '92, so that's 24 years. And it was such an incredible experience just to see them reconnect with family, but also if you have not seen some of the spots in Vietnam, look it up. Ha Long Bay, it's just gorgeous. We were out in the ocean in Ha Long Bay, the bay for on a boat for 4 days, and the views were just phenomenal.
And then the second clip I'm going to show you is a virtual one.
Are happening with regard to how we can stand up and support each other. People making masks at home, people providing meals for our frontline healthcare providers, people just doing so many different things. I don't think I've ever seen as many parades, Mr. McGravey, as I'm seeing right now for birthdays, workers, everything. Everybody, and what a great thing. And this is a terrible.
Okay, so we're back. I just want to make sure, Julie, and is everything okay? Can everyone still hear me?
Everything's great.
Fantastic. Okay, so I didn't want to take up the time. So that first one, Trom came in, and at the beginning, what you saw is we do a little bit of an icebreaker with all the politicians to kind of humanize them a little bit. There was a show many, many years ago that I loved because I'm a huge film buff called Inside the Actors Studio. And James Lipton was kind of the facilitator, and that's kind of what I do. So at the beginning, we throw them a couple softball, very easy questions. And the question that Trom was answering was, what is your favorite place that you've ever visited? And she talked about her home country of Vietnam. And then she went into how a bill becomes a law and checks and balances and working with different political parties. So we kind of try to engage the kids, and then we drop the civics on them. And by the end of it, they definitely are all in. Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr, he has also been someone that's been such an ally for me. That was actually live from his office at the State House. And that was a virtual one that I did with him. One of the lessons that my students and I were doing is we were talking about writing an editorial and testifying, and there is a new law, a new bill that is trying to be discussed. Obviously, COVID kind of took away from it, on lowering the voting age. And so what I did is I had Senator Tarr come in because he is against the voting bill. And then I had the author of the bill, Representative Andy Vargas, come in, and they each did separate talks. So the kids were able to be exposed to both sides of the issue, and then the kids made up their own mind, and then they did an editorial, the Democratic Knowledge Project. I have to give them a big shout out. They are taking all of their lessons and they're breaking it down into more manageable chunks for remote learning. So there's definitely something in there. The other thing I want to mention is just student engagement. The students are connecting with all of my speakers, especially live. They're taking selfies with Trom. They're asking them questions. They're giving them tours of the school. This is humanizing all of the politicians, and it's making it more engaging. So that'll move us in. Sorry about that. Why should we do these talks? Why should we do these talks? So I mentioned engagement. It's huge. It's very engaging for the kids. They look forward to the talks. This is something that they really, really enjoy. And I will say, if you can make it just in your class and not in an auditorium, it is going to be worth its weight in gold. Just speaking as someone who's done it both ways, an auditorium with 120 kids and a politician, it's just, it's not going to work. 25 to 30 kids with the politician, it's so much more intimate. And the politicians did give me feedback, and they were like, this is so much better than me being in a cafeteria or me being in a gymnasium or an auditorium. So you got to make this engaging for the kids. Virtually, how I make it engaging for them is I do not have the kids in on the live Google Meets, just because the more people on the call, it kind of drags things down and whatnot. So what I do is I have them ask questions. And on Google Classroom, they'll submit the questions, and that's how I involve them. The other why, let's be realistic here, the history and social studies frameworks. 8th grade civics. You need to connect all of your talks to standards. You cannot have politicians come in and make a political speech. I'm going to say this later on in the webinar. This is not a political speech. This is a lesson. You will be co-teaching a lesson with the speakers. And a lot of you might be saying to yourself, so what are you going to do? You're going to tell these politicians what to do? No, you're going to kind of gently talk to them and give them emails and collaborate with them. And I will tell you that every single politician has said to me, this is so much better, Pat, than when I just come in and give speeches to the kids. It's better for them and it's better for the kids. So I'm going to mention this later on in the talk, but essentially, what did I do? Well, I needed to cover the judiciary branch. So how am I going to cover the judiciary branch in a Civics in Action talk? Well, 2 judges from the Lawrence courts, they've come in before, and I did a virtual talk with the 2 Lawrence judges. And I mean, how you can't get any better explaining precedents and appeals and the judicial branch with 2 judges. I mean, in their robe, one of them was in his robe. Another example is how a bill becomes a law. Well, you know what? We're going to have legislators come in and tell you how a bill becomes a law. And they're going to give you real world examples. So it's really, really important that you make sure that what you're going to talk about, you are literally going to go down a checklist. I haven't covered this. I haven't covered that. And the kids will learn. It will be valuable and it will help you in the long run. A lot of my colleagues are like, oh, the kids are missing class. They're missing so much school. They're not missing school. They're getting such a valuable lesson out of this. And it's been great. I mean, the feedback that I've got from the kids and the assessments and whatever I'm doing with them always works. Okay. So let's talk about the blueprint. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get to how, and I think this is at first live, but then I will move it into virtually. I'm going to give you all a blueprint of how to do this and some manageable steps. Maybe some of you are saying, oh my God, I can't do this. You totally can do this. And I will tell you, once you plan one of these, I use the word blueprint. Once you plan one of these, you have the blueprint for the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Same thing with the virtual. Once you do one, you have the blueprint and you apply the exact same blueprint. Why reinvent the wheel to every single talk? So let's talk about the blueprint that I follow for both live and remote learning. Number 1, most important, find that curriculum connection. What in the Civics 8th grade frameworks do you want to cover in that session? How a bill becomes a law, the difference between the political parties, local government, state government, all these different types of things. And then research your speakers. Try to find speakers. Every single politician and every single activist has a social media platform. They have a website. They have links to the emails. And that's what I do. I literally will email. And when you email people, you're always going to get their administrative assistants, chief of staff, whatever. Like in our schools, the school secretaries are the most important people in the building to make friends with. You make friends with those chief of staff, administrative assistants, and they're the ones that get the message to the politicians. So what you need to do is you need to do a little bit of research and find them. And once you have one in, the other ones hear about it, and slowly but surely, all of a sudden, they're contacting you. Oh, my colleague came in. Is there any way that we could do something like that? So research your speakers. Number 3, be persistent. There's no way you're going to pull this off sending 1 email. Send 2, send 3. Once 3 or 4, you're probably going to be a pain, but be persistent. Very, very important to be persistent. And, you know, as someone told me a long time ago, the worst they can say is no. That's the worst thing. And then you just move on to the next speaker. So these are definitely things that you will follow. Have a tight and organized agenda. This is what you're going to do. You're going to email the speaker or email their staff and say, look, this is what we're going to do first. This is what we're going to do second. This is what we're going to do third. You totally take the responsibility away from the speaker. You take it on. You tweak it the way that it works for you, and then together you collaborate. And when you watch the videos that are in as resources later, you're going to see that all I'm doing is facilitating. And when one of these Civics in Action talks goes well, I'm like a fly on the wall. It's like I'm not even in the room. The politician and the kids are bouncing off one another, and I'm literally just sitting there, not saying anything, not asking questions. I'm telling you, it really works. And you'll see in the talks how engaged the kids are. And it's not always your top group of kids that are engaged. It's kids you do not expect. Obviously, I have kids on the social and emotional, you know, some of them are on the spectrum. They love these. Some of my ELL students, when Representative Vargas came in, you know, they said, "Are you Hispanic?" And he said, "I'm Dominican." And, you know, they freaked out. They couldn't believe it. And that got them engaged. When Trom came in, you know, a very nice young student who never really saws a lot in my class, was very engaged. And I said to her, "Wow, what's going on?" And she's like, "You know, Mr. McGravey, I've never had an Asian person speak in front of me in schools ever in my life." So it's those types of things that the kids walk away from. Logistics, logistics, logistics. Obviously, planning a schedule, sticking to the schedule. I do not do these in common time. I do them in my specific class. It was painfully obvious to me. I'm on a team. My team was not into canceling their classes to do this, to make it like an assembly. So sometimes what you have to do is, I have 5 classes a day. I'll have one speaker come for 3 classes, and I'll have one speaker come for 2 classes. So the logistics is really, really important. I involve the local businesses in the PTAC. I always get lunch. I always get coffee. I always network. These are things that go very, very well. Number 6, I should have underlined this. It is a lesson. It is not a political speech. You need to let your speakers know that this is not a political speech. This is not a campaign speech. This is about the kids learning, okay? And they are going to co-teach a lesson with you, all right? And that moves into number 7. Make it all about the students. It is all about them. Get the feedback from the kids. Have them do surveys. What did they like? What did they not like? Because what you think is great and what's great from the perspective of my 8th graders are not the same. And as you saw in that before and after picture, you could see what it was like when I didn't hear their feedback compared to when I did. All right, so now let's get into remote learning. Friday the 13th, as all of you, that was my last day in school with my students. Just as an aside, we were very lucky enough to be the last school to be at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the U.S. Senate. We were doing an immigration simulation on Monday and Tuesday of that week. So the last memory that I have with my students is the EMK Institute. And if you are not, just to give a plug to them, if, you know, once this all calms down, or even their website resource, the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the U.S. Senate is one of the most amazing places. And it's just a jewel to have here. And I highly recommend you checking out their website if you haven't done so already. Okay, so Julie did mention I do use Google Meet, Google Classroom, YouTube. Don't use a lot of Zoom. Don't use a lot of Zoom because my district has Google Meet. Okay, so, all right. So let's talk about remote. Let me talk about how I planned a Civics in Action remote learning activity. This is just last week, okay? So I'll take you through the whole process. So number 1, I picked curriculum. I have not done anything with the judicial branch. I did not do anything with the Supreme Court cases. So that's the thing I did first. And then I went back, then I emailed the judges. The judges, they ghosted me for 2 weeks. Finally, an administrative assistant who I know well, she ended up getting the message to them. Turns out that the Lawrence court was, the internet was not working. Also, they had problems with it. So luckily, to make a long story short, I got them to come in. I emailed them an agenda with logistics. I literally told them, Judge Olarek, Judge Sullivan, this is what we're doing. This is the, I literally gave them a play-by-play of all of the issues. I sent them the Google Meet link. I trained them on how to do Google Meet because neither one of them knew how to do it. And what I did was set up a time, got an agenda, and we recorded the show on Google Meet on Friday. If any of you are familiar with Google Meet or Zoom, you know within 5 minutes, depending on how long the video is, they email it to you. So it's all recorded and it's all done. So everything was done on Google Meet. As I mentioned, I have a colleague, Susan, who is a friend at North Andover CAM, and she uploaded it to YouTube. She edited it, she made the sound better, and she loved it because it was content for the cable channel that she was able to show. And so once I recorded it and once I uploaded it, I post the link on Monday on my Google Classroom, and that is, we're charged with doing 4 lessons a week. So what my students did is they go on Google Classroom, and the first lesson they do is they watch the video of the judges. The second video that they do a reflection activity about what they learned about the judicial branch, and then I really weave in the product. We did a debate on New Jersey versus TLO, and that's kind of what we're in the middle of doing right now. So as I said, I picked the curriculum, I got the speakers, I was persistent, I emailed them, I got an agenda, I recorded it on a Friday, uploaded it over the weekend, boom, popped it on my Google Classroom on Monday, and the lessons that I had were watching the video and then reflecting on it, and then we did a debate on New Jersey versus TLO. And the judges were great about talking about the COVID crisis and Zoom and virtual trials, talking about things like due process, and then of course talking about the appeal process. So that kind of took us through. Now you're all probably saying, "Oh wow, that sounds so smooth." That but it could be a challenge. Here's a little cartoon for you all to check out. I don't know if you could. I'm having a new technical issues. Just let me consult my in-house help desk. Did you hear the one about the teacher and the 2 judges trying to set up a Google Meet lesson? It was not pretty. It was not pretty. Neither one of them had done Google Meet. I had to talk them through it. They finally got on Google Meet. I finally hit record, and we're starting to talk, and they're still not getting it. One of the judges disconnected himself. The other one shut his camera off. It was just a complete nightmare. I persevered. I got through it. I hit stop. I breathed a little bit, serenity now, as Frank Costanza used to say, and I then did a second recording and got everything back online, got everything on, and it worked out. Why am I telling you this? It's not going to be pretty every single time. You're going to have technology not work. But I'm going to tell you, and I was talking about this with Julie and Dave at the beginning of this webinar, my kids loved it. They loved it. Because you can see in the video, they're like, Mr. McGravey, those judges are struggling with, Google Meet. Well, I can do Google Meet. And I'm like, yeah. And I think it relayed to them that everyone is going through these challenges. Everyone is going through these challenges. They are going through the challenges, their teacher and 2 judges. So I just wanted all of you to just kind of realize that this may sound great. It is a lot of work, but you have to think about the realities and the challenges that you're going to face. And I'm going to tell you that it's going to be worth its weight in gold. When you get the engagement from the kids, the borrow from that classic movie, if you build it, they will come. If you put engaging things on your Google Classroom, those kids will come. Those kids will come. And these Civics in Action talks, which obviously I was destroyed when we went to virtual learning, because the 17th of March, Congressman Seth Moulton was supposed to come. And the kids and I were so excited. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So what I'm saying is, make lemons, lemonade, whatever you want to call it. The realities and the challenges of remote learning are there. And I'm going to tell you that I have them on a daily basis. And if you watch the judge video, part 1, you'll see it. Okay, so resources. This is my YouTube channel, all right? If you go on this, you will see all 9 live talks that I did with my speakers, and you will see all 7 of my virtual remote talks. I also did a talk show with my students that you can also see. Many of the kids were like, we want to do live learning. So what I did was I had this epiphany in the middle of the night, and I was thinking about, and younger people on the webinar might not remember this, but there was a show called The McLaughlin Group on PBS, and it was this kind of crotchety, kind of mad political columnist for the Washington Post, and he would have a panel and they would talk about issues. And I did that with my students. We did a bunch of those and they were great. Those are on the YouTube channel. I also lightened it up a little bit. I got the school nurses to come on and they did a show. I got 2 of my former students that unfortunately had to leave the University of Alabama and American University, and they talked about what was it like to be a college student to have to leave their rooms. And then obviously there's an article from the Lawrence Eagle Tribune about my Civics in Action talks that you can see and learn more about. My contact information is here. I'm totally serious. Email me, all right? Please email me. I would love to see other districts do this. I'm from the Merrimack Valley, but some of you from different areas, you can apply this to wherever you're living. If you are in the Merrimack Valley, you can do this. Just don't poach my speakers. That's the only thing I don't want. But email me. Obviously, if you have some time over the summer to reflect, maybe you don't want to do it in the next 3 weeks. But maybe you're thinking ahead to the fall. Am I going to be doing remote learning? Am I going to be doing live learning? Seriously, email me. I check my email all the time. I will be an ally. I will help and support you in any way that I can, whether it's through an email or any kind of way that I can do that. So please contact me for help and advice. 1 second. And now I believe I will turn it over to Julie, and I think I was able to get pretty much within my time and I got all my talking points across. This has been so great. I can't wait to get your questions. And I really enjoyed this experience. I want to thank Dave and Julie as well. I had never hosted a webinar before. My Google slide skills were not that great. And to collaborate with Dave and Julie has just been fantastic. So big shout out to both of them. So Julie, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, great. We have a question here from Ann Boyd. She says, I have a large amount of kids as well, 150. When we want to have speakers in, we always run up against this issue because you're right, 150 students in an auditorium isn't best. How did you schedule these very busy speakers and get all of the students access to this awesome experience?
Okay, so what I did, that's a great question. So I have 130 students. So not that much less. I'm on a team, all right? And obviously there's 5 academics. I thought it was a great idea. Hey guys, let's cancel out a block of time to do, no, they were not feeling it. So as I mentioned, we have 5 classes a day, 3 classes before lunch and 2 classes after lunch. So I would say the minority of the time that speaker will stay all day. That's not a reality. And I think that's what your question's getting at. Have the 2 speakers in. So what you do is one speaker does 3 classes and the other speaker does the 2. And logistically, the kids won't see all the speakers. But since everything is videoed, for example, one day I think I had Senator DeZoglio and then I had Representative Wynn. So half the kids saw Diana, half the kids saw Trom, and then the next week, once I had the videos, the kids that didn't see Trom got to watch the video, and the kids that didn't get to see Diana got to see the video. So, and lunch is kind of cool because lunch is in the middle and the speakers can kind of say hello to one another. So basically what I did was I had 2 speakers come a day. I mean, once in a blue moon, you might get one, but in reality, you're gonna have to divide and conquer, but I will tell you it works. And my classes are only 60 minutes. So an auditorium for 2 hours with that many people does not work for engagement. And it was great. When I talk about how you have to be very, very tight, you have to make everything work. So I hope that answered your question, and that's how I pulled it off.
We have another question here from Mike Neagle. It says, thanks, Pat, really enjoyed this. 2 questions. Do you work with students to help create questions ahead of time? And do you ever provide any questions to speakers before their talks as well?
So actually, I'm going to tell you that I give the speakers the entire agenda, every single talking point. I don't want to call it a script, but I'm like, this is the script and we're sticking to it. Then what I do is I'll have the kids ask questions the day before, and then I'll look at the questions, and then I'll look at the questions, and then I will pick them out, and then I will say to the kids at the beginning of class, hey, McKenna, we picked your question. So I allowed them to do that. So I definitely involve students in that way. Now, in terms of the virtual ones, on Google Classroom, the kids will email or they'll comment questions to me, and I mention their names, and it's a big deal. Speaking of students, I also wanted to mention, you'll see that those students on the right-hand side of the slide are holding pieces of paper. Every single Civics in Action talk, I give an award to probably about maybe 2 kids in each class, called the Civic Agent of the Month Award. And it's very cool because what I'll do is I'll present it to them. The politicians, you'll see Trom Wynn is presenting. They'll take pictures. The kids are beaming. And then, as I mentioned before, a lot of local businesses will give me free food if I post on social media about them. The local Dunkin' Donuts actually donates donuts. So I have a monthly breakfast for all of them. So in the involvement of students, whether it be questions or awards, that's a great question. So thank you.
Great. So we have another one on remote programming. Is there an opportunity for students to ask questions of the speakers when the talks are pre-taped? Do you send speakers student questions ahead of time?
Yes, I do. So what we'll do is we'll maybe 3 days before the talk, I'll say, hey, here, I'll do a post on Google Classroom. Hey, Senate Minority Leader Tar is coming in. What questions do you have for him? And they'll put the questions in, or they'll email me the questions, and then I'll have the questions ahead of time. I'll email them to Senator Tar's staff. He will have them ahead of time, and then, obviously it looks live on the broadcast. But yeah, I always have kids. The problem with having kids ask live questions, especially in the live civics talks, is we love our kids, but what's your favorite color? What and it's just like you have to be very careful, and this gives you an opportunity to screen. And when kids say, how come you didn't ask my question, you'll say, well, we have so many questions, I couldn't fit them all in. And so so I do involve the students with questions, both virtually and live.
Great. If anyone else has any questions, please put them into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And if not, then I will pass this over to Dave to provide some information about what's coming up with MCLC.
Yeah, so Pat, while people are writing in their additional questions, I have one for you. You mentioned something about students doing a virtual debate after
Yes.
after the session you did with the judges.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit more about what you do for follow-up with kids after the sessions? Sounds like the debate was pretty innovative. It'd be good to hear about that. Maybe there's some other things.
Sure, Dave. So basically what I do is I show them the video the first day, and then they do a reflection the next day. And then what they do is they apply what they learn to an engaging lesson. So what they did is they did a debate on New Jersey versus TLO. They looked at both sides and they created a product about it. Then what I do is I create optional Google Meets, okay? Optional Google Meets. And I basically say, hey, if you want to partake in a debate or you want to be on a talk show with me, please email me. And then what I'll do is I'll send them the link to the Google Meet and we'll record it. So far we've done 5 of those. I had 30 kids the first one, and then 30. If I had like 60, to me that's too many. I would do 2 separate sessions. I haven't had to do that yet. My belief on live learning, and I know a lot of my colleagues are going to disagree with this, and that's perfectly fine. I don't do live learning because a lot of my students can't make the live learning, and a lot of the kids have told me that they kind of tune out. And I record a lot of my lessons, so I wanted to also say as a supplement, I do 3 videos a week of me teaching to the kids with some of the curriculum. So getting back to your original question about the debate, what we did is, I had the pro kids speak, the con kids speak, they questioned each other, and we did it all on Google Meet. I got a recording of it. I'm going to send that to my friends at North Andover CAM. They'll clean it up, and then I can show the students what their classmates did. And I will tell you that when the kids saw their classmates on this show, that really got them into it. And it was great. It was great. So yeah, so that's what I do. And that live learning is voluntary at this point. It might be different in the fall if we go that route. But I mean, so far I have 120 students, and I will say about 60 of them have come on voluntarily. So that's half, that's 50% voluntarily coming on a Google Meet to do a debate or a show. I think that's pretty good.
Great. We got a couple more questions here. We have two from Catherine Contini. The first is an easier one, which is she loves the ceiling tiles in your classroom. Are those book covers?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, ceiling tile. I've been teaching. I've been teaching 23 years. 21 of those years are in the same classroom. So our art teacher does this thing for 8th graders where they can create a ceiling tile for their favorite teacher, and it's kind of cool. They have to come and you have to talk about the ceiling tiles. And so as you can see, I have so many ceiling tiles through the years, and some of them are about Hamilton the musical, some of them are my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album cover. The only problem with that is I always tell my principal, man, if I ever move my classroom, it's going to be a nightmare to getting rid of all of those tiles. And I also say, I'm not close to retirement, but when I do retire, I feel bad for the person that inherits my room, because they're like, who the heck is this guy? What are all these tiles? So that's the answer about the tiles. Very perceptive. That's great vision.
The other question is, do other social studies teachers in your building also invite speakers?
So I am in the pilot program this year. So I am the only one out of the three of us that are doing the Civics in Action talks. They're still doing the U.S. History 1. They're still doing the U.S. Obviously in June they won't do it anymore. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think when they come on next year, not sure if they're going to do the Democratic Knowledge Project or not. But again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the blueprint to them and obviously be as a facilitator to help them. I will tell you that my colleagues did come and attend the talks. My principal was nice enough to get them substitute coverage. And I think they thought it was going to be kind of chaos and kind of a waste of time. But I think seeing the engagement of the kids was great. And hopefully, my two colleagues, they're not as outgoing as I am, so I think it's very intimidating to do those things. But I did make a promise to them, and I just said, try one, just try one. And if it's horrible, never do it again. But I feel pretty strong that once they try that first one, it'll be great. Plus, they already have the resources ahead of time. So the answer to your question is, hopefully next year with our new crop of 8th graders, and since everyone in the state will be following the civics frameworks, they'll jump on board as well. But since I was in a unique situation, being the only one of the three that were piloting with the Democratic Knowledge Project, kind of a year ahead of everyone, it was just me this year. But it's very important when you do these things to be transparent and share everything and make sure that all your colleagues know about these things ahead of time. That was a huge priority for me. And a big shout out to my principal, George Gonsalve. He has been so great. He has attended every single one of these talks, and he loves it because from a leadership point of view, he tweets things out. The parents seem very happy about those things. So it is a win-win in terms of it's a win for me, it's a win for my kids, the politicians win, and of course your administrator wins as well.
Great. We have another question from Emma Blydenberg. She would like to know what the judges specifically discussed during the remote learning session.
Great question, great question. So basically the first thing they wanted to do is they wanted to make sure that all the kids knew that the courthouse is open for business, but the doors are locked. They kept saying that. They were talking about the COVID crisis, and they talked about how their job has been very, very different. They talked about the introduction of virtual trials, which obviously things are trying to do now. But what they also talked about, which I thought was brilliant, and this was not in my original plan, they talked about due process. And they were talking about if a accused criminal gets a virtual Zoom trial, is that the same as having a real trial in the courtroom? And so they definitely talked about that. They also talked a little bit about how important it is to keep trials going, because as Judge Sullivan said, even though we're in COVID, criminals don't stop breaking into stores. Domestic violence does not stop. So they really brought it in to the realities. The other thing that I just want to briefly mention is Judge Ulrich, sorry, I always get his name wrong. Judge Ulrich, he is a referee, so he refs college basketball at private schools. And so when he would come in for Civics Day, he would do this amazing analogy where he'd come in the robe, and then he'd take the robe off and wear his referee jersey. And he would talk about how a judge is just like a referee. And the analogy is great. And a lot of the kind of jockey kids were really into it. And then I'll just end with what the judges said. They talked a lot about the appeal process. And the thing that I really loved is they were both talking about how hard it is to get to the Supreme Court. New Jersey versus TLO is the exception to the rule. So they were like, it's really hard. So they were saying, like on TV, when you see someone say, I'm going to take it to the Supreme Court, that's not a valid statement. And I also threw in kind of a funny question. I was just telling them, what about portrayals of judges on TV and movies do you not like? And they were hilarious. They talked about the corrupt judge. They talked about the crazy judge. They talked about judges are always in a bad mood. Two great guys. I encourage you to watch the Judge Civics in Action talk, because they're both really cool guys. And for the kids, it breaks the stereotype of who they think judges are, which is great. So hopefully I answered your question about the judges.
Great. So we have two more. One is from Terry Yaffe. She said, should we continue remote learning next year? Are there other Civics in Action programs you are contemplating in order to teach civics to your students?
Well, yeah, so I'm definitely going to be doing this Civics in Action I'm going to definitely be doing these. I am going to be going into my year 2 of the pilot with the Democratic Knowledge Project. And over the summer, a bunch of us who are piloting, me being in North Andover, and then obviously people from across the state, we're going to work on revamping this Democratic Knowledge Project program. It covers pretty much all of the standards and a number of curriculum units. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make the lessons better as if we were going to be going into live learning. But the Democratic Knowledge Project have done such a great job of taking these really in-depth lessons and breaking them down. Just to give a quick example that I was talking about with Dave at the beginning before we came on, the Civics in Action projects that all the kids, eventually all 8th graders are going to have to do. Originally, when we were going to pilot it, it was going to be 2 months. The Democratic Knowledge Project now has it broken down to a 3-week unit, a 2-week unit, or a 5-day unit. So what I'm going to be doing is a combination of what I did last year and obviously kind of adapting and tweaking for remote learning. But these Civics in Action talks are definitely going to happen again. And the great thing is my new students have not seen any of these. So now I don't have to go out and find people. I already have them. And I already have the connections made. The other thing is the politicians, they love this stuff. They tweet it out, they put it on their social media. Obviously, videos, you definitely have to get an acceptable, you get parental permission, those forms that our kids and parents always film. Obviously, the other thing is filming. I only film one of the classes. So if I had a speaker come in to speak to 3 of my classes, only 1 would be filmed, and then the 2, only 1. And then what I do is any kid that does not have permission to be in the video, I always make sure that their class is not videotaped. So, those are things that you definitely have to think about logistically, because some parents don't want their kids on video, and you got to respect that.
Great. So I think our last question is going to be from Ian Levine. The civics project requirement is a big and new addition to the frameworks. Have you found a way to incorporate your civic action talks into ideas for these projects?
That's great. That's great. Good question. So the Democratic Knowledge Project definitely focuses on the Civics Action Project, it kind of is building, and they have a poster, and you can probably look it up, Democratic Knowledge Project, the 10 questions that you need to ask if you want to become civically engaged or a Civics Action Project. What I do is I have the speakers try to talk about real world civics projects that they have been a part of or they have seen. So when the town manager came in, she talked about a previous town that she had worked in and how the town was going to buy a camp that was closing down. And she talked about the Civics in Action Project going through the steps. Rick Gorman, who is the head of the youth services director in North Andover, the kids have this gorgeous state-of-the-art youth center that was built in 2000, and they take it for granted. Rick told them that that was a Civics in Action Project. Rick worked with federal, state, and local government and fundraising, and he took the kids through the process. So I always have the politicians come in and give examples, but what I also do is I try to have activists come in. I had a couple people that started charitable foundations, and they came in and they talked to the kids, kind of giving the kids a little taste of how to do a civics action project. So that has been I'm so glad you asked that question, because I probably should have put that in my slides. So thank you for that. That was a great question.
Great. Well, we're going to end strong. We're coming to the end of the hour here. So Dave, I know that you have a couple of things that you want to share as we close out.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So Pat, thanks so much for this session. It's been really informative and I think inspiring for folks to hear about your experience. Given that you're starting this new broadcasting program, the McGravey Group, we're hoping that you stay in education, that you don't go off to some other line of work soon.
I don't get to worry about that.
So I just want to underscore, the fact that you're creating these videos and that they are available asynchronously for students. And as we try to wrestle with this whole issue of engaging more students, making sure that all of our kids in all of our courses and classes are actually attending and participating in the content and in the curriculum, I think this is a really good model that you've suggested here for reaching those kids. So I hope folks can take that lesson and run with it as well.
And Dave, I just want to briefly interrupt. That was not just lip service. My email, seriously, please email me. And again, I know you're all in the midst of going through remote learning, but once June comes and you've exhaled a little bit, come July and August, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm totally serious. Please email me at that email address and I will get back to you. I totally mean that. I would love to see this expand outside of the Merrimack Valley. So I just wanted to say that quickly, Dave. Sorry for interrupting.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's very generous of you, Pat. Thanks. So this is this webinar is part of a series. We had one a few weeks ago, as I said, and we have another one coming up on June 11th. A group of instructional coaches, part of the team of the Boston Debate League, will be sharing some of the strategies they've developed, particularly to address civics in their content that they're working with. They work with a lot of different disciplines, but among them is civics. So they'll be sharing some of their strategies and some of the activities they've developed to really engage students in the current virtual classroom environment. So hopefully you can join us for that. Information about signing up and registering for those sessions is available on the Mass Civics for All website, and you'll see the link there. But if you simply go to Mass Civics for All, you'll find the resources page, and that will lead you to where we have information about the webinars. You can also register there to receive updates about future webinars, because we are planning to continue this series and eventually take up some new topics in addition to this focus on remote learning. So I just want to thank you again, Pat, for all your work putting this together and for really sharing all your expertise and your good humor in creating this work with your classes. So thanks again. Thanks to all of you for attending today.